remember the exact sound the pen made when I set it down on the table. It didn't click. It didn't snap. It just rested there, quiet, final, like a door closing without a slam. That was the moment everything changed, though I didn't know yet how far the fall would go. The house was silent that afternoon, the kind of silence that used to feel like peace. Years ago, it meant safety. It meant I had done something right. I built this place brick by brick, sometimes literally, most times metaphorically, with overtime shifts, sleepless nights, and sacrifices no one saw but me. Every wall held a memory. Every corner held a version of me that had survived something. Back then, this house wasn't just shelter. It was proof. Proof that I could build a life from nothing. Proof that my son would never have to grow up the way I did. And for a long time, I believed I had succeeded. When he was little, he used to run down the hallway barefoot, his laughter echoing against the same walls that now stood quiet. He'd jump into my arms like the world couldn't touch him, like I was enough to keep everything bad away. I held onto that version of him for years, even when it started slipping through my fingers, because somewhere along the way, something changed. It didn't happen all at once. That would have been easier to see, easier to stop. No, it came slowly, like a crack in glass that spreads before you even notice it's there. At first, it was small things, a tone in his voice, a hesitation before saying thank you. A new way of looking at things, less like a son who cared, more like a man calculating what was his. But I ignored it. Parents are good at that, ignoring the things that don't fit the story we've told ourselves. I told myself he was just stressed. That life had hardened him a little, the way it hardens all of us. I told myself that underneath it all, he was still the boy who trusted me. I was wrong. The first time he brought up the house, it sounded harmless. We were sitting at the kitchen table, the same one where I'd helped him with homework years ago, where we'd shared meals and laughter and long talks about his future. That day, though, the air felt different. Not tense exactly, just heavier. You should think about the future, he said casually, scrolling through something on his phone. You know, planning ahead. I nodded. I've been planning my whole life. Smiled at that, but it didn't reach his eyes. I mean legally, structurally, things can get complicated if something happens to you. Something happens to you, the words lingered longer than they should have. I'm fine, I said. Healthier than I've been in years. Yeah, but still, it's smart to prepare. People transfer assets all the time, makes things easier for family. It was subtle, careful, wrapped in concern. I didn't say no, not then. I just listened. He leaned forward slightly, his voice softening. I'm not saying anything bad is going to happen. I just want to make sure everything stays secure. In the family. In the family, it sounded right. It sounded responsible. It sounded like something a good son would say, but something in me didn't sit right with it. Not yet alarm bells, just a quiet unease like a whisper I couldn't quite hear. I'll think about it, I said, and I meant it, because I trusted him. That was the first mistake. Over the next few weeks, the conversations became more frequent. Still calm, still reasonable on the surface. But each time there was a little more pressure behind the words. He started bringing documents, printed forms, highlighted sections. I talked to someone, he'd say. This is standard. Everyone's doing this now. It protects the family. He'd sit beside me, pointing things out, explaining terms I already understood, but let him explain anyway. Other times he'd stand, packing slightly like he was trying to convince himself as much as me. And every time he framed it the same way. This is for you. That was the part that confused me because it didn't feel like it was for me. It felt like something was being taken, slowly, politely, wrapped in logic so I wouldn't notice. I started asking questions. What changes for me if I sign this? Nothing, he'd say quickly. You still live here. It's still your home. Still your home. But something about the wording bothered me. If it's still my home, I asked one evening, why does it need to be in your name? He paused, just for a second, but I saw it. It's just legal structure, he said. It avoids complications later. Later, everything was about later. But what about now? That question stayed with me long after the conversation ended. At night, I'd walk through the house, touching the walls, running my fingers along the edges of door frames I had installed myself. I remembered the first coat of paint, the first leak I fixed, the first time my son slept in his own room, afraid of the dark until I left the hallway light on. This house wasn't just property. It was my life. And slowly, the idea of signing it away began to feel less like planning and more like surrender. Still, I didn't confront him. Not yet. Because part of me still believed he meant well. That belief didn't shatter all at once. It cracked. The turning point came one afternoon when he stopped asking and started insisting. You're overthinking this, he said, his voice sharper than before. We were standing in the living room. The same room where we used to watch movies together. The same room that now felt smaller, tighter. I'm thinking exactly as much as I need to, I replied. He exhaled, frustrated. Why are you making this difficult? Difficult, that word hit differently. I'm not making anything difficult, I said. I'm just not signing something I don't fully agree with. You don't trust me? He asked. There it was, the shift, not concern anymore, not logic, emotion, pressure. I didn't say that. You didn't have to, he snapped. It's obvious. The room felt colder. This isn't about trust, I said carefully. It's about ownership. I'm your son, he said. Everything I'm asking is for the family. The family. The word sounded different now, less like unity, more like leverage. I built this house, I said quietly. I'm still here, I'm still capable. There's no reason to change anything right now. Stared at me, his expression unreadable for a moment, then something hardened. You're being selfish, he said, selfish after everything, after years of putting him first. After sacrifices he would never fully understand. That was the moment something shifted inside me, not anger, not yet clarity. I'm not signing it, I said. The words came out calm. Steady, final. For a second he didn't react, then he laughed, not warmly, not kindly, just short. Fine, he said. Do whatever you want. Just like that, the conversation ended, or so I thought. The rest of the day passed quietly. Too quietly, he stayed in his room. I stayed in mine. The house, once filled with shared space, now felt divided. That night, I went to bed with a strange feeling I couldn't shake. Not fear exactly, just something unsettled. I told myself it would pass, that things would go back to normal, that we'd talk it through. I was wrong again. Sometime after midnight, I woke up. At first, I didn't know why. The house was still. No noise, no movement, but something felt off. I sat up, listening, nothing, just silence. Eventually, I lay back down, convincing myself it was nothing. And for a few hours, I slept. Morning came like any other. Or at least it tried to. I got up, made coffee, went through my usual routine. The normalcy felt almost forced, like the house itself was pretending everything was fine. But underneath it, something was different. I felt it in the air, in the way the walls seemed to hold their breath. Around midday, I decided to step out, just for a walk. Clear my head. I grabbed my keys, opened the front door, and stepped outside. The sunlight hit my face, warm and familiar. For a moment, everything felt normal again. I closed the door behind me. And that was the last moment I felt like I belonged there. The walk didn't take long. Maybe 20 minutes. Just enough to settle my thoughts. When I returned, I reached for my keys just like I had thousands of times before. I inserted the key, turned it. It didn't move. I frowned, pulling it out, trying again, nothing. I checked the key. The same one I'd always used. I tried again, slower this time. Still nothing. That's when the unease turned into something else, something colder. I knocked, no answer. I knocked again, louder, still nothing. Then I noticed it, the lock. It was new, not just changed, replaced. My hand hovered over the doorknob, my mind struggling to catch up with what my eyes were seeing. This couldn't be happening, not like this, not here. I stepped back, my heart starting to race. I called out, louder now, silence. The house stood there, unchanged on the outside. But inside, something had shifted, something had been taken. And for the first time in my life, I realized something I never thought I'd have to face. I wasn't just outside my home. I had been shut out of it. And just like that, everything I thought was secure wasn't anymore. I don't know how long I stood there. Time didn't move the way it was supposed to. It stretched, warped, folded in on itself as I stared at the door that used to open with a simple turn of my wrist. My hand was still hovering near the lock, like it hadn't yet accepted what my eyes already knew. This wasn't a mistake. This was a decision. His decision. A strange kind of silence settled around me, not peaceful like before, but heavy, suffocating. The kind of silence that presses against your chest until breathing feels like work. I knocked again, harder this time. Open the door, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. This isn't funny. Answer. I pressed my ear against the wood, hopping for something. A footstep, a voice, even the faint sound of movement, nothing, just emptiness. And that's when it hit me, not all at once, but in slow, crushing waves. He meant it. This wasn't anger. This wasn't a moment. This was deliberate. My son had locked me out of my own home. I stepped back, my legs suddenly unsure beneath me. The sunlight that had felt warm just minutes ago now felt harsh, exposing. Like the world had shifted and I hadn't caught up yet. I looked around, half expecting someone to be watching. Neighbors, passers-by, anyone who might confirm this was real. But no one was there, just me. And a house that no longer belonged to me. For the first time in years, I didn't know where to go. That realization was sharper than anything else. Not anger, not betrayal, not even fear, displacement. The kind that strips you down to something raw and unfamiliar. I reached for my phone, my fingers trembling slightly as I scrolled to his name. I called. It rang once, twice, then went straight to voicemail. I tried again, same result. I stared at the screen, willing it to change, willing him to pick up and explain this. Tell me it was some kind of misunderstanding, some twisted attempt at making a point. But deep down, I already knew this was the answer to my refusal. You won't sign. Then you don't belong here. The logic was cruel in its simplicity. And it worked. I sat down on the front step, the same step where I used to watch him leave for school, where I'd wave until he disappeared down the street. Back then, I thought I was sending him out into the world. I never imagined he'd be the one to push me out of mine. Hours passed, or maybe it was minutes. I couldn't tell anymore. Eventually, the world began to move again. A car passed. A neighbor's door opened. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. Life continued. Just not for me. I had to move. That thought came slowly, but once it did, it wouldn't leave. I couldn't sit there forever, so I stood up, my body feeling heavier than it should, and walked. No destination. No plan, just movement, because standing still felt too much like surrender. I ended up at the end of the street, then beyond it, then further than I'd intended. The familiarity of the neighborhood faded with each step, replaced by something unfamiliar, something uncertain. That's when I realized something else. I had nowhere to go. Not really. Friends had drifted over the years. Family, well, family was complicated now, and pride had always been my shield. I had built a life where I didn't need to ask anyone for anything. Now that same pride felt like a wall I couldn't climb. I stopped walking. For a moment, I considered going back. Knocking again, demanding answers. But what would that change? The lock was still there. The decision had already been made. So instead, I turned toward the one place I hadn't been in years. Police station. The walk there felt longer than it should have, like each step carried more weight than the last. By the time I reached the doors, my resolve had thinned into something fragile. Still, I went inside. The air was cool, sterile. The kind of place where emotions didn't belong. A woman behind the desk looked up as I approached. "Can I help you?" The question was simple. The answer wasn't. "I've been locked out of my house," I said. Even as I spoke the words, they didn't sound real. "Do you have identification?" Asked. I nodded, handing it over. She glanced at it, then back at me. "And who locked you out?" "My son." It was out in the open. She paused just slightly. "Do you live together?" I did. Pause, then a sigh, almost imperceptible. "This sounds like a civil matter," she said. "If he's claiming residency or ownership." "He doesn't own it," I cut in, my voice sharper than I intended. "I do. It's in my name." She studied me for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Then you may need to go through legal channels." "We can't force entry without proper cause." Legal channels. The phrase felt distant, abstract, like something that belonged to someone else's life. "I just need to get inside," I said quietly. "I understand," she replied, though her tone suggested she didn't, not really. "But this isn't something we can resolve here." Indifference versus desperation. That was the new contrast. And I was losing. I left the station feeling smaller than when I'd entered. The world outside hadn't changed. But I had. I wasn't just someone who'd been locked out anymore. I was someone no one could or would help. At least, that's what it felt like, for a while. Because not everyone looked at me the way she had. I didn't realize that until I found myself sitting on a bench near a small shop, trying to gather what little composure I had left. That's when I heard a voice. "You okay?" I looked up. It was Mr. Hallam, the man who owned the shop. I'd known him for years, not closely, but enough for familiar nods, occasional conversations. "I'm fine," I said automatically. He didn't believe me. "You're not." Direct, honest. That was new. Something in me cracked, not completely, but enough. "Son locked me out," I said. The words felt heavier the second time. He frowned. "Locked you out?" "Changed the locks." Stared at me for a moment, processing, then he nodded slowly, like he understood more than I'd said. "Come," he said. "Sit inside." I hesitated, pride again, but this time it didn't win. I followed him in. The shop was small, but warm. The kind of warmth that doesn't come from temperature, but from presence. He handed me a glass of water. "Start from the beginning," he said. So I did. And for the first time since it happened, someone listened. Not just heard, but listened. That changed something, not everything, but enough. Because in that moment I wasn't alone anymore, and that made all the difference. The days that followed weren't easy. Nothing resolved overnight. There were forms to fill out, offices to visit, explanations to repeat. Each step felt like pushing against something invisible, system versus persistence. And persistence is exhausting when you're already broken. But something had shifted. I wasn't standing still anymore. I was moving forward slowly, painfully, but forward. As the process unfolded, more truth came with it, not all at once, piece by piece, like a puzzle I never wanted to see completed. My son had tried to transfer utilities, had spoken to people, had made plans. This wasn't a reaction, it was preparation. The realization didn't shock me, not anymore. It clarified things. This wasn't about misunderstanding. This was about control. And control doesn't negotiate, it takes. But for the first time since that night, I wasn't just reacting, I was deciding. And that changed everything. The confrontation didn't happen in the house, not at first. It happened in a small office across a table that felt too narrow for everything that sat between us. He looked different, not physically, but in the way he held himself, confident, certain, like he believed he had already won. "You're making this bigger than it needs to be," he said. I studied him. This was my son, and somehow he wasn't. "You locked me out of my home," I replied. "It's not just your home," he said quickly. "It's family property. Family again, always family when it benefited him." "It's in my name," I said. "For now," he replied. There it was, not hidden anymore, not softened, just truth, greed versus integrity. And this time I saw it clearly. "I'm not signing anything," I said. "I don't need you to," he shot back. Silence filled the space between us. But this time, it wasn't suffocating. It was clarifying because I finally understood something I hadn't before. He wasn't asking anymore, he was taking. And that meant I had a choice, not about the house, about myself. I could fight, or I could fold. For a long time, I had confused peace with avoidance, thought that keeping things calm meant keeping things right. But peace without boundaries isn't peace, it's surrender. And I was done surrendering. The legal process wasn't fast, it wasn't clean. It wasn't fair in the way I wanted it to be, but it moved. And with every step, I felt something return, not the house, not yet, something else, my voice, my footing, myself. The final outcome didn't come with a dramatic moment, no shouting, no sudden reversal, just a decision, a recognition of truth, of ownership, of reality. The locks changed again. But this time I held the key. Standing in front of the door once more, I hesitated. Not because I couldn't enter, but because I understood something now that I hadn't before. This house, it was never just walls, and it was never what made me strong. I turned the key, the door opened. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was stepping back into something. I felt like I was stepping forward, because what I had lost was never really mine to begin with. But what I had found, that was something no one could ever take again.